Hello, and welcome to the South Coast Artists Index, where artists, performers, and writers, as well as curators, directors, and supporters, anyone with ties to the creative community, drops by to introduce themselves to you. We'll talk about their beginnings, their vision, their passion, and so much more. The South Coast Artists Index podcast is brought to you in part by Heavenly Spirits, who invites you to celebrate the art of life and creative communities everywhere.
Hi, this is Ron Fortier with another In Focus podcast brought to you by the Artist Index, or more directly in this area, the South Coast Artist Index. And as per usual, I'm going to have our guest introduce themselves and spell their names, please, and then we'll get rolling from there.
Sure. Hi, I am Patricia A, also known as Patty Thomas, Patty-Thomas. Nice to be with you.
Same here. It's funny because you said it had a flashback to some episode on television. You know, I can't remember where I put my keys 10 minutes ago, but I remember things from 50 years ago on television. And you said Patty and Thomas. And, I think it could have been a Sesame Street episode. Watching with my daughter or my grandkids. And it's like, well, there's only one of you. Where's Thomas? Like Patty and Thomas. Yeah,
I love it. Well, it spells out Pat too, P-A-T, the initial.
Exactly. So tell us all about Patty and the Culture Park. Is that correct? Is it Culture Park?
Culture Park Theater.
Yep.
Well, I started before that. I was born in New Bedford, went away to college to study music, got a degree in music, came back, and I taught in New Bedford in the public school system for a year and a half. I taught music education, classroom music. You might have been my student. I then went back to school for theater, and I went to the Trinity Repertory Conservatory and stayed involved in theater evermore, and music though. And I graduated from the conservatory. I was given a fellowship to apprentice with the company, received my equity card, Actors Equity Association. I'm still a member, a proud member. And I acted with the company for many years, and really, still work as an actor here and there, but mostly went into directing. I went into teaching after, at the end of the 90s, actually beginning of the 90s, I went to Switzerland, where I taught for 2 years in a prep school. I taught theater and music. Following that, I went to Russia. I was in Moscow teaching music and theater for 2 years. So that was just wonderful experience all the way around in the performing arts world, especially in Russia. And then I moved back to the States and was in Boston for a few years doing theater at the Boston Center for the Arts and at the Theater Offensive, with great people and with young adults in the program. And subsequently moved back to New Bedford in 2001.
Wow.
And we started Culture Park Theater then. And just to connect it to Russia, in Russia, there was a metro stop called Park Kultury.
Yeah.
And it featured sculpture and visual arts. And my friend and I thought that would be the name of a great performing arts company, Culture Park. And hence, that's where we got the name.
Yeah, I remember the first piece of press that I read about it. And I said, this is excellent, because for the longest time, and I brought this up several times on this podcast, and especially since CVPA was torpedoed, and broadsided at the same exact time. For the longest time, I've said that this area really needs, and as we get older, we say things that leave the younger generation blinking. I mean, you're getting older when you do a Seinfeld reference, and you see a young person scrunching up their face like, well, who? And they try to think, is this a philosopher or, and that is, we need a fame school, or, and I've altered my thoughts on this, we need a junior senior visual and performing arts school in this area. It could be supported by multi-towns and cities, because there are just kids. I have a master's in fine arts. You have a master's in theater. Is it
not quite a master's, but it is connected to the Brown program?
Yeah, exactly. So our brains obviously don't work the same as the great unwashed, as they say in theater. And I think that would be a godsend. My wife went, born and raised in Detroit, went to Cass Tech. Cass Tech is, if you can imagine, a combination of vocational, technical, and visual performing. And their who's who, their alumni, is just absolutely unbelievable. One, for example, is, and I've mentioned her before, Ella Joyce, who was on the Rock television show. We went to go see her. She was performing in the Berkshires this summer, invited us up. My wife and she have been, friends for all this time. And that's just one of the luminaries from that program. So Culture Park, I'm assuming, is giving kids, youth, or as just blanked on his name from my three sons, Fred Gwynn. As Fred Gwynn said, and my cousin Vinny, youths, right? What has that entire experience been for you from that?
I mean, I think you're right. I mean, we wanted to take our cues from the community, not to be, to quote a Grant, but we really did, and found that we were working with, willing and wanting to work with people who wanted to take steps in theater, not just young people, but adults as well, because you don't get a lot of opportunity, either you're in or you're out. So, and it started with playwriting and local playwrights wanting a place to experiment, to have their plays read, to hear their plays, etc. And but all along, I thought, and especially with the CVPA, that there was an opportunity to really collaborate and make a strong program for teens, maybe specifically, that would fill a gap, because, as you know, and as you're saying, in Detroit, in Boston, saturated, wonderful programs in the performing arts, and we know the visual arts as well are maybe stronger here, but and just in terms of opportunity. But that's what I thought could happen, and I still think it should and can, and maybe a high school for the performing arts. But I did think that collaboration, or with Bristol Community College, but that collaboration could have happened.
I mean, it's not as though theater is foreign to us. I mean, a lot of the movie houses, there's an age tag or generational tag. A lot of the movie houses were previously performing houses, theaters. And Fall River had a phenomenal history there. It was because of that. Did you ever run across a Tom Higgins? He was a English high school instructor at Dartmouth High School.
Sounds familiar.
You'd know him. He was theater.
Yeah.
He was born in the trunk on the backstage of the Strand kind of story.
Yeah.
His father was a rigger, and it was he that saw some of my artwork and said, "Hey, you're going to design the new sets for Oliver, for the your senior classes."
Nice
performance.
But I think.
And from there, it just like, I mean, it was like I was working with Yale drama people, because the network. It's, and I think I've mentioned this to someone else before. I've worked in food service. That's one of those places where one of those professions that you don't burn your bridges and you don't cut, you don't do something you can't undo, because eventually the circle comes all the way around and you're going to be holding your hat in your hand, trying to get back in the door of the place that you hated at one time.
Time passes quickly.
Yeah. But it's also such an incredible network that you can get a job without ever applying for a job or filling out an application.
Especially in the technical end of things. I mean, that you're valuable. It's so important. I love that you design sets. I just think that's great.
Thanks.
Yeah.
From that, I worked for, what was Southeastern Massachusetts University, SMU Opera. And from there, I worked with Boris Goldovsky of the Metropolitan, who I heard as a child living in New York on the radio, because my granduncle was a real cultural maven. And because of that association with Tom Petricelli, who ran a production company, Scrambled Legs and Straight Seams.
That's good.
And then, they put me in contact. I never met her, but I was on the phone with her a lot. Sarah Caldwell, the grand dame of opera. That shocked the heck out of me the first time I spoke to her on the phone.
My paper says Sarah Caldwell. Can you say it? Because I'm working on a piece about her and Kulthum, who is an Egyptian singer. But I did meet Sarah Caldwell. So you spoke with her on the phone.
I spoke on the phone, and if you were to tell me after speaking with her, not knowing who she was, that she was the director of Boston Opera, I'd say, bullshit. I'm sorry. That lady is like a force, which, in theater is, the old broad, which is a term of endearment, but wow. And because of her, she set me up. Again, I was offered the job of set designer for the Nutcracker.
Fantastic. It's important. It's really important.
It's not to blow my horn here. It's to get people to understand the box that theater is in.
If you say yes, you trust, and those are important. Those are the two, then you can hang, then you're gonna be important because of your work and your ability to collaborate.
Yeah.
But speaking of Fall River, my roommate in college was Jane Fiore, who, rest her soul, just passed away, and her father was Faust, the head of the symphony, the head of the music department in Fall River. So I got a great vibe and know about Fall River and just the little theater, the sort of tradition that they have. I mean, mine is less musical theater, although I am a musician. I'm a pianist and a singer, but really at Trinity in the conservatory, it wasn't musical theater, it was theater.
Legit, what they call legitimate theater, is that what it was?
I mean, I think they do call it that in New York. But yeah, the little repertory companies that are and are training there in the conservatory and then working with the company. But
it's there was I don't know if you've ever run across him. I think his last name was, I think he was of Italian extraction, or it could be a French, but it was either Como or Como. He was a psychology professor once upon a time. I don't know if he's still there. And he wrote a piece about how theater and dance are so important to the developing young people. Because it gives you a sense of, well, you always know where you are because you've got to be on your mark. You've got to know what's around you. You don't want to bump into the scenery. You've got to know what your cue is, and this, and then the movement part is very important.
Oh, I love dance. I think that's so, but I mean, I think that, and music, which may be number one for me, but these it's important for everybody, not just a person who may feel inclined to sing or dance or something. But
Now,
yeah.
let me ask you, how has Culture Park evolved? Are you still on the, everybody has that goal on the horizon. Did you zigzag? Did you choose another goal? Because sometimes what we intend and what ends up are two different things.
Absolutely. I don't even know what our intent. We did absolutely want to do new works, new plays, work with a range of people, experienced, seasoned, new, also a range of themes, but and we felt that focusing on themes that are resonant in this area would help us focus. And so that's what we did. And I think that we just had our 19th short plays marathon at the New Bedford Whaling Museum, which was a wonderful event on the 18th, and we featured 25 new works, solo and plays. And I think that that's a very good question, because as an organization, we stuck to it. We have stuck to it. And I think we've been willing to bend as well. And I think now I'm at a point where I want to do not just new works, I want to do established works. So I can see that I am trying to find an avenue that Culture Park will hopefully go with me down it.
Now, did you have a summer program at one time, or you still have it?
We did. We had a program. We've had a couple of great opportunities working with kids. We had Shakespeare for Kids, which we did for a few years. And we did it as an after-school program with a range of kids. We involved the New Bedford Housing Authority. We involved the public schools. And we produced little skits, and also, not to call it a skit, but little scenes that we extrapolated from certain elements of Shakespeare and worked with the kids. So we did do that. But yeah, we've had a few programs over the summer, but that was the main one, the Shakespeare for Kids.
You just reminded me of a high school experience. One of my high school English instructors, Doris Sapuka, who oddly enough ended up as one of my students. Too long of a story to talk about, but she arranged for us to go up to, and I don't even know if they still have this program at Natick High School, but it was astounding. I mean, for a high school, they were like levels above a community college and levels, and within the same level of I guess university college level, and
in terms of theater
production. Oh my gosh, it was it was theater and around. That was another thing. It was the first time I had ever experienced that. And the first production we saw was Macbeth, which was really, really interesting in the round. Especially all hail Macbeth, Thane of Cawdor, and then like the voices in the woods, because it's the audience and the cast is spread everywhere. It was unbelievable. That was phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah.
Billy Budd was an almost wet my pants moment, because when they went to hang Billy, I wasn't expecting what they did. They put the noose around his neck. And as per the British Navy, they had 3-4 men who had to run him up the mast. And they ran through the audience, down one of the aisles. And you see Billy just go up and see swinging over the audience. And it was like,
crazy.
You're in the moment, of the character, and at the same time there's this, you're in reality going, how the
Yeah, Theater is so exciting, and you don't need much. You don't need much. I mean, a good set design is always wonderful, but you make something from nothing, and I mean that's what you do. That's what we all do, but really can. And with a little imagination, it is amazing how you can suspend, in the audience will that disbelief.
Yeah, I mean, and it's one thing about set design. It could be the most minimalist set, where I think that's really either low budget and genius, or just plain out a total different insight. But what's so cool about it is everybody has to work together. And it was the same experience of when I was working in food service. Everybody had to pull. Everybody had to pull, and nobody had a demeaning job. Nobody had an unimportant job. Everybody's job was important. And that's really good training for kids, more so than read, remember, regurgitate, and MCAS.
Yeah. Right. I mean, the cooperation, the collaboration, the saying yes, the trust, those are things that's what happens when it's really working.
And speaking of culture, the cultural difference between Switzerland and the U.S. was it Sweden?
No, I was in Switzerland, and then I was in Moscow, Russia.
Okay, so I want to just separate those two. So Switzerland and the U.S. cultural differences.
Oh, wow.
And even educational structure.
Yeah, definitely. But I was teaching an American system prep school with kids from all over the world. I don't, to say sophisticated, I would just say mature, and a great group of people. I had a lot of Japanese students. So of course that form of education, their educational system is very different, but they were had a school in Lausanne, the same village where the Lausanne American School was. So I taught there as well, and then I went to Japan to do an informal sort of what do you call it when you give an introduction to a place? Orientation, yeah. To the students who were then going to go to Switzerland. But I mean, I think that it was an all-inclusive. It was a residential program. The students were staying overnight. They were on their own in a certain way. We were going on trips you can't even, it's hard to compare. And I was lucky because I have taught public school, range of schools. I've taught university, colleges, but to teach, it was just a fun teaching experience. And in Moscow as well, because everybody was there, everybody was giving, everybody was happy to be where they were. And we did a lot of theater, a lot of short plays, small productions. And
well, the theater too in the Russian culture is huge. It's huge. I was listening to Stories from the Stage, and the woman that was doing, presenting her story, she was tasked with bringing Sesame Street to Russia, which she thought, hey, whoa. She kept slamming into walls because we really don't understand their culture and things that we think are so, what's wrong with a little kid doing the lemon? One of the scenes in this program where they're selling lemonade. Oh, no. Only criminals sell stuff on streets. Okay. So there was like all these wacky kind of things, but I could only imagine that the theater there, the participation, the whole 9 yards is very intense. It's not a laughing kind of.
No, it ranges from the very small to, the Bolshoi, but it's totally was, the funding ended, but they were all state run. Your tiny little opera company on a street corner, that is a tiny little place, but they're still producing these amazing performances. So I think that that's a testament to you work with what you have, and you give, and it's hard. There was a lot of harsh, but I think that ultimately they wrote the book, and it was so fabulous to be in a place that had excellent dance, and Jesus Christ Superstar, for example, was an underground production. I mean, it
Really?
had above ground, but it was, in the 80s. So there was just all of this great energy, great people.
Right.
Really, really.
Right. So all these experiences, both home and abroad, what does your future and the future of Culture Park look like?
Well, it's hard to say no. I mean, we've established certain things that we do here. So we're about to do Chapter 40 for the Whaling Museum, Midnight Foc'sle, on January 6th. So I keep thinking, well, maybe our 20th year, next year, we'll do something completely different, and we'll record that, or we'll find, we'll do a whole different take on something that we've been working on for a while. So I just think that we keep putting one foot in front of the other. I would like to tour with, I'm the editor of Two Portuguese-American Plays, which UMass Center for Portuguese Studies and Culture had us develop a play through a Portagee Gate, which I adapted into a full-length play, and it's been performed here. But we are seeking funds to tour the two plays to the Azores and Portugal. So I think that bringing our stuff out of New Bedford is one thing that we'd like to do.
Yeah, that sounds. I mean, I lived in Figueira da Foz, which is on the central coast of Portugal, the silver coast of Portugal, and the Center for. I'm always trying to retranslate it because it's not easy. The CAI, this Centro de Espetáculos e Artes e Espetáculos, the Center for Arts and Performance, the Performing Arts Center.
What's the name of the town?
Figueira da Foz.
Oh, sure, I've been there actually. Yeah. Oh, wow.
And they're very open. I mean, and the performances that they put on have been, I mean, from the the really nice stuff to the holy crap, and they've got a good sized house.
Yeah. That's nice to hear. I mean, we do, because one of the plays starts in the Azores in São Miguel and then comes to New Bedford. And then the other play begins in Setúbal, which is Setúbal, which is, and there's another performing arts center there. A friend of mine is sort of helping us identify these.
Well, they have one in Figueira too. It's called Caras Direitas. How do you translate that?
Are you Portuguese? I love you.
I'm half Portuguese.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, my mother's half. Yeah.
Oh, nice.
Genetically, I'm 99.8% Iberian. That'll get me a cup of coffee. But yeah, I mean, and that's another thing too about theater, and and it's a habit that I've had all of my life, is always when I hear somebody say something, is I'm not trying to be Mr. Big Shot or whatever. It's like, hey, I know a guy, because it's all about networking. It's and most of the collaborations have been by complete happenchance. Because when you're looking for a specific character or whatever, a specific performer to play a specific character, you're never going to find them until you stop looking. It's kind of and then you mentioned the Moby Dick. I think it's chapter 47 or 42, the whiteness of the whale. I would love to see that. Especially today, I would love to see that one chapter totally produced for stage.
When we first came here, to New Bedford, we did an adaptation of Moby Dick, no less, a one-man adaptation, and we did tour around, called The Everlasting Itch, Meditations on Water and Longing. And we did it as a one-person play, about 32 minutes, and the person plays all the parts and everything. But the whiteness of the whale,
yeah,
and the albatross, and not only that, in chapter 40, there are the concentric circles. This is the chapter, Midnight Foc'sle, that
right.
Melville wrote as a little play, embedded in the middle. But there's a race fight, there's white and black, there are the concentric circles. They pledge to Ahab. The storm, a crazy, crazy storm starts happening. So it's such a little microcosm. And I don't really get tired of working on it year after year because it's very interesting and it brings up all that stuff.
There's more and more evidence now that, scholarly evidence that Moby Dick was the second Uncle Tom's Cabin. But he was so... People like, where's he going with this stuff? He kept throwing all kinds of noise in there, like facts, about whaling and about the ocean and so on and so forth. But when you start reading through those things, you're going, his abolitionist viewpoint is just phenomenal. It's funny because I decided a couple of years ago I had to take a bite of the apple. I'm born and bred here, so I might as well do it. And I did chapter 87, The Grand Armada, which is the chapter that always stopped me in my tracks. I've never read the book straight through because of the killing. That
it's gruesome.
It's very gruesome, especially when you can't tell the bloody lance line from the umbilical cord of the calving whale, and the two different worlds, the them and the us, the up and the down. It's just absolutely phenomenal.
It is. And also Pip, well, not to just, but Pip, the little cabin boy from Baltimore, is the voice of reason, who'd go chasing after chestnuts now because of what he's seen. And that, on the first day of the year, you go into the world woods and you find chestnuts, and that's what he remembers of Baltimore. And he's Ahab's cabin boy.
They've been trying to prove for a long time. In fact, one of the books that had been published locally, Douglas and Melville anchored together in neighborly style. They can't. It's almost like trying to prove, what's going on now in the country with Trump, and now with this whole thing about phone records. They don't have transcripts, they don't have actually what was said, but if they plot the timeline, they can see who was in the room at what time, that kind of thing, and how it evolved, from the scene to the next scene. And every this idea that Melville borrowed a lot from Douglas's speeches. You can find bits and pieces of it, and then Douglas has a lot of references to Moby Dick without saying so. But I guess the big thing is going to be when somebody finds out, yeehaw, we got them having coffee on Madison Avenue or whatever in New York. Yes, it was for real. This actually happened. But when you said Pip in Baltimore, I'm thinking to myself, oh my gosh, this Baltimore connection, it's to me, it's not coincidental. It was purposeful,
Right.
But we're gonna start wrapping it up. We got about 5 more minutes. Is there anything that you would like the listeners to know about you, Culture Park, things in general?
Just that we're still here. We're a small nonprofit, and we want people to know that we're here for them. If anyone wants to, is interested in theater, would like to take some steps. We also have started a play lab for people writing plays, and we're at the Co-Creative Center with that for people who are interested in taking steps writing a play. So we're still giving opportunity. We still have, and that's what we're focusing on new plays still, and we want collaborators.
Let me ask you a question. We talk about youth and culture and so on and so forth, but do you see theater as, especially for some kids, adults, whatever, it is a form of therapy? People who have depression, anxiety, whatever their challenges are, is theater, in your estimation, is theater a helpful therapy?
Well, absolutely. I mean, I think that, people who, I'm not a therapist, and it is used, music therapy. Theater is also part of a healing process. But I just think anytime you have an opportunity to really stand in your own shoes, on your own 2 feet, and be open and truthful, that healing can happen. I mean, I think it's the healthiest thing you can do, to collaborate with other people who are shy, or say, I could never do that. Sometimes they find that they can, and they really want to, and they really have a desire and a respect for it, and that's why they sort of feel that they need to pull themselves back. But yeah, I'd like to ask people to do something creative. Give yourself permission to be loud, be out there, be quiet.
Be somebody else.
Permission.
Be somebody else.
Sure, put yourself. I said in your own shoes, because I think that's takes such power. But of course, and to put yourself in other people's shoes, try to understand, another culture or another person, another personality. That all happens. It's healthy. It's a healthy thing.
What do you say to people who say, "Oh, but I can't remember lines"?
That's like the least of it. You really can. You really can.
There are tricks. There are techniques.
Yeah, exactly. There are lots of ways, whether it's through the blocking or through a sense memory or through whatever the case may be. There are lots of ways, and that's really the least of it. I think, once go through the scene with no lines, just be present, and you get a lot from that.
Excellent. Well, Pat, Patricia.
And Ron, I don't know if I'm terrible with all this stuff.
No, you're not. No, this was absolutely wonderful. And I'm lucky I've got a little bit of a background. Nothing like yours. But I'm lucky to have a little bit of that, so I can at least have a place to come from, instead of being a total babe in the woods on this. And it's something that still does intrigue me.
I hope you do more theater, yeah.
Well, here's a shocker, and really quick. I did a series of paintings of my wife's enslaved third great-grandmother, whose children were sold away from her in Virginia. And I just wanted to get into the skin of this woman. We don't know what her name is. Of the 3 women, the mother and the 2 daughters, we only know one of the women's names. It was Child back then, but then women. Charity Ann, that was my wife's second great-grandmother.
Wow.
And that formed that whole line, the Parker line. And I wanted to know, what did she smell like? What did the sun feel like on her skin? Were there bugs? What were sounds going on? What was the humidity? All these environmental things. And that's how I threw myself into it. And I'm still not done. I want to revisit that series again. It's a deep dive. For me, it's a whole new thing. And I've had people come up to me and say, "Oh my God, these look like set designs. These look like stage production pieces." And I'm like, "Oh, how the heck
can
would
start
you
like
figure,
that,
How would you?" Because I was a set designer, so it was
that sounds really great, Ron. I think you should definitely find. Is it film, or do you want to imagine a little scene on the stage, something that maybe could activate that in the way that you want it.
And I think they're crossovers, that
Mhm.
stage experience to go into the painting, so that now the narrative that you're looking at kind of makes sense.
I'd love to see your work. I see some behind you. I guess I look forward to that.
Thank you. Well, folks, thanks so much for joining us. Today we were with Patricia Thomas from Culture Park. It's really been a great experience, and I really think that you're one of those individuals, as are many of the people. If this is not a one and done for our guests, we'd love to have you come back on the show.
Thank you. I'd love to. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. And folks, see you next time, and thanks for listening. Bye-bye.
We'll see you next week for another episode of the South Coast Artist Index podcast. To learn more about the South Coast Artist Index, visit theartistindex.com. Find us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube.